My mother would say, the only reason you're here is because the hanger didn't work. I said, if there was really something wrong with your brain, I would have definitely opened up the window and put you on the windowsill and let you freeze.
The world sees Sylvester Stallone as the ultimate symbol of strength, the unbreakable boxer, the fearless soldier, the man who never goes down. But the truth begins with something painfully different. He was born with a damaged face, mocked as a child, ignored by schools, and pushed to the edge of homelessness before anyone believed he mattered. So how does a man the world calls invincible grow out of a life built on rejection, hunger, and silence? And more importantly, what did success really cost him when the cameras turned off? Stay until the end, because the battles that made Stallone a legend were not fought in the ring or on the battlefield. They were fought where no one was watching. New York did not welcome Sylvester Stallone. It tested him. After school failures and endless rejections, Stallone drifted through the city with no safety net. Some nights he slept in bus stations. Other nights he stayed wherever the cold would hurt a little less. Hunger was not dramatic. It was constant, a quiet pressure that never left his stomach. He was not chasing fame. He was chasing tomorrow. Auditions came and went. Casting rooms barely looked up. His voice sounded strange. His face did not fit the mold. Doors closed before he could explain who he was. Money ran out. Pride followed soon after. Then came the moment Stallone would later call the lowest point of his life. With rent overdue and no food left, he accepted a role in a low-budget adult film. 2 days of work, a few $100s, no dreams attached, just survival. It was not ambition that led him there. It was desperation. Years later, when the film resurfaced after he became famous, the world laughed. Stallone did not. He knew exactly what that choice had cost him. But the loss that cut deepest was not public. Out of options, he stood on a street corner holding a sign. Beside him sat Butkus, his dog, the only constant in a life that kept falling apart. Stallone loved that dog more than himself, but love does not pay for food. He sold Butkus for a few dollars. As the dog was led away, Stallone walked in the opposite direction, fighting tears in the middle of the street. He would later say that moment hurt more than hunger ever did. It felt like giving away the last proof that he mattered to something alive. Most people would have stopped there. But in the silence that followed, something strange happened. With nothing left to lose, Stallone began to write. Not for Hollywood, not for success. He wrote because it was the only way to stay sane. A story about a broken man, a fighter no one believed in, a man who refused to stay down. He did not know it yet, but that story was already fighting back for him. And in the next chapter, everything would change in a way no one saw coming. The idea did not arrive gently. It hit Stallone like a dare. One night, nearly broke and emotionally empty, he watched a boxing match on television. The fighters were not perfect. They were exhausted, bleeding, stubborn, and something inside him snapped into focus. This was not a story about winning. It was a story about refusing to quit. Stallone locked himself into a small room and began to write. For 3 days, he barely slept. Pages piled up fast, fueled by anger, hunger, and years of being told no. The character was not heroic. He was awkward, poor, overlooked, a man nobody chose. Stallone was not imagining someone else. He was writing himself without mercy. The script was called Rocky. When agents finally read it, interest came quickly. Studios liked the story. They liked the underdog angle. They liked the heart. But they did not like one thing. They did not want Stallone. Executives offered him money for the script, more money than he had ever seen. Enough to eat, enough to breathe again. But there was a condition. He would sell the story and disappear. A real actor would play the lead. Stallone said no. He said no again and again, even as his bank account stayed empty. Even as he still did not have his dog back. Even as people told him he was making the biggest mistake of his life. He knew this was his only shot. If he gave up the role, he would give up himself. Eventually, the studio agreed, on one condition. The budget would be small, expectations would be low, and if the film failed, Stallone would be blamed first. He accepted without hesitation. With his first real check, he ran through the streets looking for the man who bought Butkus. He paid thousands of dollars to get his dog back. In the film, that reunion is real. The tears are real. Nothing was acting anymore. When Rocky was released in 1976, the world did not just watch it. They felt it. The film won Oscars. Stallone went from sleeping in bus stations to standing on the biggest stage in Hollywood. Overnight, he became a symbol of hope. But behind the applause, a quieter truth waited. Because the moment you rise that fast, the fall is never far behind. And in the next chapter, success begins to take its first real price. Fame changed everything, and it ruined more than it saved. After Rocky, Sylvester Stallone was no longer invisible. Studios wanted him. Magazines followed him. The world watched every move. But the man who had survived hunger and silence was not prepared for the noise. Success did not arrive gently. It flooded his life and washed away the quiet places where love once lived. His first marriage collapsed under the weight of ambition and absence. Work came first, always. Films replaced conversations. Sets replaced home. And Stallone began to confuse motion with meaning. Then came relationships that burned fast and publicly. Headlines, photographs, expectations. One marriage ended almost as quickly as it began. Another relationship promised stability, but carried its own storm beneath the surface. In the early 1990s, Stallone was involved with supermodel Janice Dickinson, while still emotionally tied to Jennifer Flavin. When Dickinson became pregnant, Stallone believed the child might be his. Fear took over. Instead of facing the truth, he chose distance. He ended his relationship with Flavin not in person, not with a call, but with a 6-page letter sent by courier. Cold, careful, final. Years later, Stallone would admit it was one of the most cowardly things he ever did. The child turned out not to be his. By then, the damage was already done. Stallone returned to Flavin, apologetic and exposed. They rebuilt slowly, but the cracks never fully disappeared. Love had survived. Trust had not. And as the years went on, Stallone learned a painful lesson. Fame can give you everything you dreamed of and still take the one thing you cannot replace. But nothing in his life prepared him for what came next. Because the next loss would not be a relationship. It would be a child. And when that moment arrived, even the strongest man in Hollywood would have nothing to protect him. Nothing silences a man like the loss of a child. And for Sylvester Stallone, silence became unbearable. In July of 2012, his son Sage Stallone was found dead in his home in Los Angeles. He was only 36 years old. The news spread fast. Headlines rushed to fill the void before truth could catch up. Rumors whispered about drugs, about excess, about Hollywood darkness. Stallone said nothing. Behind closed doors, he was breaking. Sage was not just his son. He was his first, the boy who grew up watching his father fight on screens around the world. The boy Stallone had tried to protect from the weight of fame, even as he carried that weight himself. When the autopsy report was released, the truth was quieter and crueler. Sage had died from heart disease. There were no illegal drugs in his system, only prescribed medication following dental surgery. The story never corrected itself in the public mind. Stallone watched his son be judged even in death. Grief does not scream, it drains. Friends said Stallone moved like a ghost during those months. He continued working because stopping felt worse. On set, he held himself together. At night, the walls closed in. He later asked the public for one thing: do not speculate. Do not sensationalize. Let my son rest. Losing Sage reshaped him. The anger softened. The hunger for applause faded. Stallone began to speak differently about life, about time, about what success cannot save. No amount of strength could undo that loss. No role could distract from the empty space it left behind. But grief rarely arrives alone. As Stallone struggled to hold himself upright, another storm was forming, one that would drag his name into scandal once again. Not about love, not about family, about his body, his image, and the truth behind the muscles that made him famous. And when the world learned that truth, it did not respond with sympathy. It responded with judgment. For decades, Sylvester Stallone's body was part of the legend. The muscles, the endurance, the image of a man who never weakened. But legends are fragile when truth steps in. In 2007, Stallone arrived in Australia to promote a new Rambo film. At customs, authorities discovered dozens of vials of human growth hormone in his luggage. The substance was illegal to import. The story exploded overnight. Headlines moved fast. Fans were stunned. Critics were ruthless. Stallone did not deny it. He pleaded guilty, paid the fine, and stood by his explanation. He said the hormone helped him recover, train, and endure the physical demands of action films at an age when most men were slowing down. He did not frame it as cheating. He framed it as survival. The public was divided. Some saw honesty, others saw hypocrisy. The same man who represented raw discipline and old-school grit was now being questioned for the very body that built his career. Talk shows mocked him. Articles dissected his age, his face, his choices. Stallone did something unexpected. He spoke openly. He admitted fear. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Fear of letting the audience down. Fear of watching the only language his body knew slowly betray him. He did not ask for forgiveness. He asked for understanding. Not as a hero, but as a man aging under the weight of his own myth. But the damage was done. The image cracked. And once the armor breaks, everything underneath becomes visible. Old questions returned. About control. About ego. About what Stallone was still fighting for. Yet the deepest battle was not with the media. It was with ownership. Because while the world believed Stallone owned Rocky, the truth was far more painful. He created the character. He lived the story. He became the symbol. But he did not own it. And when that truth surfaced publicly, it reopened wounds that had never healed. To the world, Rocky was Sylvester Stallone. But legally, Rocky never was. As the years passed and the franchise grew, a quiet truth followed Stallone everywhere he went. He created the character. He wrote the story. He lived the pain. Yet the ownership belonged to the producers. The rights were not his. The control was not his, and the profits, for the most part, were not his either. For a long time, Stallone stayed silent. He had learned the cost of speaking too loudly in Hollywood, but silence carries its own weight. When the Creed films moved forward and Rocky continued without his full voice behind the scenes, that weight became too heavy to carry. Stallone went public. He spoke directly to fans, calling the situation painful and unfair. He did not attack the films. He attacked the system that allows creators to build legends they do not own. The producer at the center of it all was Irwin Winkler, a powerful figure in Hollywood who legally held the rights to Rocky. The response was swift and uncomfortable. Some accused Stallone of bitterness. Others finally understood the truth, that a man can be inseparable from a character and still be powerless over its future. For Stallone, this was not about money anymore. It was about dignity, about legacy, about wanting to leave something to his children that truly belonged to him. He was no longer the hungry man sleeping in bus stations, but the feeling was the same: being on the outside of something you built. The conflict never exploded into courtrooms or shouting matches. It lived in statements, in interviews, in carefully chosen words, and sometimes in long silences that said more than anger ever could. Stallone kept working. He kept smiling in public. But something had shifted. The realization that even your greatest creation can be taken from you leaves a mark that never fully fades. And just as that wound reopened, life delivered another blow. This time, not from Hollywood, but from home. At an age when most men are slowing down, Sylvester Stallone was still fighting. But this time, the battle was not on screen. In 2022, his wife Jennifer Flavin filed for divorce after more than 2 decades together. The filing shocked the public. Court documents accused Stallone of actions that damaged the marriage and the family finances. Headlines moved fast. Numbers replaced emotions. Houses, assets, and contracts were suddenly worth more than years of shared life.